Git configuration. Before I get started, I just want to show my Git configuration file. Okay, this is what it is. For user, I have a name and email, credentials, credential helpers, OSX keychain. Okay, this is the most important part that I want to show you. I'm basically defining the .global_ignore file in my home directory to be where I define which files get ignored when I do a git commit. The stuff down here, I don't know how it got here. This, I know why it's there, but I don't understand it. And this is basically set up to match my name and my email that I use for GitHub. But, this doesn't necessarily have to apply to my GitHub account. There won't be a big disaster if the name and email don't match, but I just like them to match. GitHub. The system-wide config file is etc git config, and it really doesn't get used, and it doesn't even exist on my system, on my Mac. The practical location for configuration is my user.gitconfig file. Here I'll define who I am in the Git world and what defaults I want to have. There's also another not used config location, a location where Git configuration can be stored. It can be stored within a project so that I can define my own user and email for that particular project. The same stuff that would go in a configuration file, I can redefine it on a project level, but nobody actually does that. A person can go in and open up their .git config file and use a text editor and make changes. However, you would have to know what you are doing, and you would have to know what the format is for a Git configuration file. Now, an alternative and a much better way is to use the git config command, and it'll have an option, usually global. And don't worry, I'm going to show you what this command looks like. And then be able to set any configuration value. There are 3 options. See here where I said some option for the git config command? Okay, these are the options I'm talking about. Either system, global, or no option. Most likely, I'll be using the global. And that causes any configuration changes to be stored in my user.gitconfig file. And when I say user, I'm talking about my Unix user, not my Git user, okay? My Git user basically defines my persona in the Git universe. The Git universe is where I do Git stuff, like do commits, and I want to identify who I am, or, my Git default settings, okay? So I want to emphasize that I need to isolate my user on a Unix system from my user in the Git universe. It's true that there's a lot of correlation. For example, I have to define my own .gitconfig file in any server under any username which I utilize, okay? I will have to do that over and over again. However, I will be doing it using my same Git persona. It's just that it doesn't carry around very easily from one Unix user account to another Unix user account. Okay, here's some, I haven't actually implemented all of these, but these are good configuration settings to use. About the color user interface, I don't know if I'll use that yet or not, because the bash on my Mac isn't even in color. So I don't even know if that would work. And with regards to the core editor, assuming I'm using Git on the command line, it's okay if it pops out nano, but I may be using NetBeans and editing within there and somehow doing commits from within NetBeans And then if I want to edit the commit comment, I wouldn't want it to pop out nano. I may want to, edit the comment within NetBeans. I'll talk about that in another slide. Configuring which text editor. I'll just read what it says here. Also, if I decide I want Git to fire up NetBeans when there is a need to edit a commit comment, I can research that on the internet. It will work with the git config global core.editor and then editor and some options command. Okay, I still don't know what my workflow is going to be, but I just want to emphasize the point that sometimes when you give a git command, Git wants to pop out an editor to allow you to edit some text, like a git commit comment or something. So this command, git config global core.editor, is the command that's used to specify which editor gets popped out for me to use. And it also takes some option, usually, an editor, and it may even take an editor and some options for the GUI editors. One option is for making the focus come back to the command line or after the editing is done and stuff like that. However, I'll investigate that later if I have to. There's two ways to display the configuration. There's a command git config list, or you can just display the .git config file on the screen. The git config, instead of list, you can specify user.name or user.email or any field to look at that field instead of just listing everything in the configuration.